Before working at a crisis center for many years, anytime someone mentioned suicide, my heartbeat would quicken. I would get anxious, and I would often hear the myth that talking about suicide would cause others to think about it and maybe even consider it. This is not the case, and today I want to try to dispel this myth that talking about suicide implants it in someone's head. I will do this in several ways. First, I'm going to talk about the different types of suicidal thoughts, how they can show up in our speech, and some theories about why they're there. Second, I will talk about the different risk levels of suicidal ideation from a crisis perspective and help you understand what we as mental health professionals look for and what happens if someone is at high risk. And then finally, I'm going to touch on what you as a listener can do if you or someone you know has thoughts of suicide. It is not your job to evaluate them and know their risk level, but you can ask questions, provide support, and get them the help if they need it. Please know that this topic can be difficult. So if you are around young children and you're not ready to have this conversation with them, maybe put some headphones on. But also know that kids younger and younger are being exposed to these topics and experiencing suicidal thoughts themselves. So if you'd like to find a way to destigmatize learning about it and asking for help, maybe choose to let them listen to this episode. I do not plan to go into graphic details of different types of action, but we will talk about different methods and plans within the context of risk level. If this is a topic that might trigger any past trauma, or you realize that you might be at risk, remember that you are not alone, and there is always someone out there to support you. You can find a crisis center near you, dial 988, the National Helpline, or even go to a hospital in a pinch. You have options, you are not stuck, and you have a choice. I will do my best to provide specific resources in the description of this episode. However, the majority of my experience comes not from reading books or watching educational videos, but rather from working at a crisis center for many years with several wonderful colleagues that supported me in this journey. So, all of my knowledge I credit to them. Thank you for being here, and let's see if we can destigmatize and create some insight today. Suicidal thoughts can be a normal reaction to feelings of overwhelm. We all experience them at some point in our lives, even if we don't realize that we do. Thoughts are an automatic reaction our brains have to the situation that we're in. And if we're stressed, down, or especially feeling stuck, our brains work hard to help us find solutions to that discomfort. And when nothing we're doing is working, our brains will just go towards suicide, even if we don't want it to. Have you ever had a really stressful week at work and thought, man, I wish I could just go to sleep until this is all over? Or I just don't want to be here right now. Believe it or not, these can be a form of suicidal ideation or suicidal thought called passive ideation. Passive suicidal ideation does not involve a plan or intention to act on those thoughts, but simply having thoughts of wanting to die or not wanting to be around anymore. This is really common, and as I said, is often your brain's reaction to feeling stuck or overwhelmed by your current circumstances. You are not your thoughts, and just because you have a thought that you'd better Okay, try that again. You are not your thoughts. And just because you have a thought that you'd be better off dead does not mean it's true. I will repeat that. You are not your thoughts. And just because you have a thought does not make it true. The other type of suicidal thought or suicidal ideation are active thoughts. These are the thoughts that explicitly call out suicide. These thoughts can sound like, I want to die, or I won't be alive next year, or even I'm going to hang myself. These thoughts can be really scary to think or even hear a loved one say, and can often make us freeze because we are afraid if we continue to talk about it, it will make it worse. While these thoughts can be scary, keeping them inside of us can be even scarier because then we feel alone, isolated, and like we have no other options. Talking to someone and being someone willing to talk about it can help get the thoughts out of our heads and give us the power back to decide what to do with them. As I said earlier, thoughts are just a reaction we have to our situation. So how do we know if someone is actually at risk or not? In crisis work, we look for 4 pieces of information, and I'm going to go over those now. I do not expect you to remember these or try to evaluate someone in the future, but it can be helpful to have this context. 1, to normalize what crisis evaluations can look like, and 2, hopefully it can make it a little easier if you ever need to visit a crisis center for support. The first thing we look at is whether or not you're having thoughts of suicide and what types of thoughts you are having. Passive thoughts are less risky than active thoughts, but any thoughts at all can be an indication of risk. Second, do you intend to act on those thoughts? If you're having thoughts but never want to do anything about them, I take it as a sign that you're hurting and you need a place to let those thoughts out, to work through them and figure out how to deal with what you're struggling with. I like to ask for a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 equals no thoughts. You are happy and safe and there is nothing wrong. And 10 means if I let you walk away, you will end your life. If someone tells me they're at a 7, I ask what makes it a 7 and not an 8. Basically, what's keeping you safe? And I also ask what makes it a 7 and not a 6. So what are the triggers for these thoughts? What's making them worse? If you have intent to act, then I ask about what you've done with that intention. Specifically, do you have a plan? Some people have thoughts about suicide and kind of think about doing something about it, but it doesn't go farther than that. Others have thought of a method, but still don't really want to make it happen. And those at highest risk have thought of a method, have a plan, maybe even a time and place where they'd want to do it, and high intent to carry out those plans. Typically, if someone knows when they are going to attempt suicide, they are much more likely to act on those thoughts than somebody who has just sort of thought about how they'd want to do it. The final thing we look at, if someone has thoughts, intent, and a plan, is whether or not they have the means to carry out that plan. If someone's thinking about pills, do they have a medicine cabinet full of them? If they want to shoot themselves, does your family have a gun? Is it out in the open or locked in the safe? Do you have the combination? And if there are means to carry out that plan, this is the highest form of risk. At this point, if all 4 are present, it's a sign that someone is a danger to themselves and may need intervention to stay safe. Rarely have I seen someone come in with all 4 by themselves. Usually, a family member or a friend has brought them into the crisis center because they are worried and they want their loved one to be safe. And the person who is suicidal, who I'm working with, is often so lost in their despair, they don't even see that love and care that brought them there, and often brush it aside as obligation. In my experience, it is not an obligation. It is a fear that they're going to lose someone that they care about, and they're going to do anything to help them stay safe and see that they're not stuck. Now, everyone's circumstances are a little different, which is why this is not black and white. And asking these questions and seeing where they're at matters. And when we do a crisis assessment, we don't just look at risk level. We also look at who is there to support them, what coping skills they have, and how likely they are to accept that help. For example, if someone has thoughts and a plan, but they have parents or children or a best friend that are around and willing to check in on them regularly, help them get to therapy appointments, or are really just a reminder that they are loved and wanted, that can lower that risk. If someone has activities that they look forward to, this lowers risk. If someone has a pet that they love and would never leave, that's a great reason to stick around. And even someone's faith can be a reason to not end their life. For example, in Christian faith, suicide is seen as a sin. So many in that faith would never act on those thoughts for fear that they wouldn't get into heaven. Even that is a way to lower that risk. What is keeping you around? So, just because someone is having thoughts of suicide does not mean they'll act on it. And being curious and being willing to ask questions can be really helpful in knowing where they are truly at, and also reminding them that they're not alone and there's someone there that cares about them. However, as a friend or a family member, it is not your job to ask all of these questions or complete a risk assessment. So if you are worried about somebody, if you are talking to them and that risk seems to be higher than you are ready to deal with, please find a professional near you that can help you on this journey. Please find a professional near you that can help you on this journey. Now, let's say you go to a crisis center and they do an evaluation. What happens next? Depending on the level of risk, there are also different levels of care that you can be referred to. If you are low risk, you might just be given some coping skills to think about. Be reminded of the ones. Try that again. Depending on the risk, there are different levels of care that you can be referred to. If you are low risk, you'll be given some more coping skills to think about and be reminded of the ones you already have, like the people that support you and the hobbies that you love. At the next level, you might be referred to outpatient therapy, either just being given information so you can sign up yourself or helping you set up an appointment right then and there. They might also send you voluntarily to an inpatient facility, which can be just an overnight visit, a few days, or even several weeks, depending on the level of care that you need and what your risk level is. And finally, if you are not interested in going voluntarily and you are high risk and a danger to yourself, mental health professionals do have the ability to put you on a 72-hour hold. When this happens, you're often taken to a hospital for observation. And at the end of those 72 hours, if you are still a danger to yourself, you're sent to a higher level of care, like an inpatient facility. Inpatient facilities also have different levels of care, but we're not going to go over those today. These levels are often determined by whoever you're working with and what they see as your risk level, the type of insurance you have, and what beds are currently available near you. Now, this is a lot of information that I'm giving you. So what I want you to take away from this is that you don't just show up at a crisis center and then you're sent away. There are so many steps and points of intervention to help you find safety, where we try to instill hope that you are not stuck or lost and you are not alone. You are not alone, and you're not crazy. You're just stuck or overwhelmed or deeply sad, and your brain is struggling to see past that. But there is something that comes after. If you haven't listened to my last episode with Ray, I recommend listening to it now, because she talks about a moment where she moved past that overwhelm, and realize that she does have a life worth living. And it is an incredibly powerful story and a great reminder that you're not alone and you're not stuck. You can survive your pain. You just have to be willing to feel it, to let that fear and sadness exist along with the happiness and joy that you wish you could feel. We don't get to pick and choose, but you're not stuck. The last topic I want to share with you today is what you can personally do. As I said, your job as a friend or a family member, or even just you, if you are suffering from suicidal thoughts, is not to complete a crisis assessment. Your job is to be a part of their support system and try to be a reminder that this isn't the end. It doesn't have to be. This means reminding them that they are not alone, that they are loved, and that they can talk about it with you if they need to. If someone does bring up suicidal thoughts in your life, do not just brush them away and pretend like they said nothing. This can create a deeper feeling of isolation. Instead, be curious. You can thank them for opening up to you and remind them that you are a safe person. You can ask questions like, how long have you been having these thoughts? Are you thinking you might act on those thoughts, or are they just there? You can also remind them that these thoughts can be normal because they're your brain's way of trying to find solutions when you feel stuck. And if at any point you feel out of your depth and are afraid for their safety, you can also help them by taking them to a crisis center, a hospital's psych department, or find them a therapist they can talk to. The nation's helpline is 988, and there will always be someone to talk to and walk you through this process anytime you need it. Now, I'm giving you things you can do to support those in your life that are struggling with suicide, but also know it is not your job to take this journey on for them. The only person that can decide to work on this, that can decide to try, is the person that is struggling. You can be there, you can listen, you can support, you can take them to crisis centers. But at the end of the day, only they get to decide how much work they are going to put into it. It can be a really hard thing to navigate when you care about someone so deeply. So also remember that you, as that support, are not alone. And you can also get help as you figure out how to navigate this while setting boundaries for yourself. As we're wrapping up, I just want to emphasize that it is okay to talk about suicidal thoughts. You will not make someone suicidal by asking them about it. And once again, you are not your thoughts. And just because you have a thought does not make it true. We covered a pretty heavy topic today, but it's an important topic. I ask that you notice your reactions to everything I said today. If something resonated for you, if you felt anxious about any particular part, and remember that you have the power to help and support yourself and those you care about. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at insightswithuspodcast or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoy this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, and subscribe. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating Insight with Us.